Me and my friends are using a Ouija board for the first time. It keeps asking people to leave the room. I'm using this post to chronicle the events of this evening, as they are truly fascinating. Some quick backstory. The small section of the city that me and my friends live in is generally known to be haunted. And even if you're not a believer in the supernatural, it's at least a bit eerie. I'm not going to dox myself by stating the location, but let's just say that creepy sightings and murders/deaths due to unexplainable circumstances are our bread and butter. For most people, this means you move away as soon as you can. For folks like me and my friends, who absolutely love all things spine-chilling, it generally makes for a pretty good time. Our Halloween parties are awesome. Most of our drinking nights have some sort of spooky game interlaced into them. And if you have literally nothing to do on a Friday night with your friends, you can always go on a tour of some of our old haunted locales. Graveyards, abandoned buildings, creepy forests, you name it. So with that background established, let's cut to tonight. Me and my closest 3 pals decided to try our hand at using a Ouija board. Were we going to be normal and try to use the Ouija board in one of our family attics? Nah, too basic. We instead decided to trek up together to, what I shit you not, is an abandoned treehouse in an elevated section of our city, surrounded by forest. What could go wrong, right? We climbed up to the treehouse, sat down a spooky-themed rug, lit some candles, and brought out the Ouija board. Despite my pretty extensive resume of dealing with all things creepy, I'd never actually tried a Ouija board before, so I was really excited to see what would happen. We went into this excited to break every rule in the book. We weren't going to do a seance, we were going to ask whatever we want, and we didn't need to worry about being respectful to the spirit, etc. We figured if something interesting were to happen, it'd be more likely if we went in as carefree as possible. We sat in a circle around the Ouija board and got started, asking the simple question, is there a spirit with us? With all our hands placed on the planchette. No real response. We fluttered the planchette in a few different directions, but we could tell we were kind of forcing it. We asked a few other questions. What is your name? When did you die? Nothing really came of it. After trying for the next half an hour and not really getting anything in the form of a response, we decided that we probably didn't have any spooky luck tonight, and opted instead to share scary stories in the treehouse. We left the Ouija board out just in case we'd get luckier later in the night. Amidst a break in our storytelling, where everyone was grabbing drinks and snacks from their bags, I decided to give the Ouija board another go. I placed my hand on the planchette alone and whispered the following question. Will you please grace us with your presence tonight? Surprisingly, the planchette started moving. It's hard to explain, but you kind of know when something is moving on its own, versus you sort of subtly and subconsciously moving it with your hand to force an answer. This felt real. A tingle went up my spine. It was cool as hell. My hand was moved to the following letters. Y-E-S. Awesome. I looked over to the group and told them that the Ouija board was working again. Excitedly, we all huddled around and placed our hands on the planchette. I followed up with another question. Where are you from? We sat there excitedly waiting for something. Instead, nothing. The planchette was still. The lack of any sort of external force with us was very, very obvious. Disappointing, but I had an idea I wanted to follow up with. I turned to my friend Kevin and asked him, do you want to try doing it solo? It worked for me. Kevin was confused, but he decided to give it a try. We all backed up to give him some space with the Ouija board. He placed his hand on the planchette and repeated my question. "Where are you from?" His expression changed to shock as his hand started moving with the planchette. He turned to all of us and mouthed, "I'm not doing this," to which I excitedly mouthed back, "I know." I pulled out a notepad and recorded the answer. As the planchette went from letter to letter, I recorded the following. Not important. Love it. A spirit with some sass. I asked Kevin to back up for a sec as I approached the Ouija board, prepped for one final solo question. I asked, "Why are you only responding when there's one of us using the board?" Yet again, the planchette moved effortlessly with my hand. It was faster this time, so I said the letters out loud and had another one of my friends, Eleonora, transcribe onto my notepad. The answer was, "One at a time." Fair enough. I thanked the spirit, my hand still on the planchette. "I appreciate your answers, friend." To my surprise, in a strange synergy between me and the spirit, I felt compelled to move the planchette again. It was the fastest it had ever been this time, as it covered the following. "Tell everyone else to leave." Huh? My friends looked at me skeptically as I said the letters at a time. "Are you sure you didn't just force that on purpose?" asked Eleanor. I assured her I definitely didn't. That was definitely from the spirit. At this point, this had been the most clearly supernatural phenomena I'd ever experienced in my life, and I was excited to keep going. My friends, usually unflinching and made of ice, were a little bit thrown. Eleanor and Martin looked ever so slightly spooked, but Kev was willing to go with it. "Might as well see where it goes," Kev said, as he started climbing down from the treehouse. With a slight bit of hesitation, Eleonora and Martin followed suit. Sweet, an actually creepy night. I embraced the quiet amidst the lighting of candles and the power of the Ouija board. I geared up for my next question. I wasn't going to hold back. "Spirit, how will I die?" I took in a deep breath, waiting for the movement. Slowly. "Depends." Interesting answer, if not a bit underwhelming. I geared up for my follow-up. "Oh, come on, Spirit. What about something a bit more specific?" My hand moved with the planchette to the following letters. I tried hard to focus and connect the letters since I didn't have anyone to transcribe with me. "What is your name?" Weird. Completely dodged my question and asked me my name. Okay, all-knowing spirit. I assumed you'd already know that. I decided to try tricking it. "My name is Belle." Movement from the planchette on the Ouija board. It said, "Do not lie." Well played, spirit. I gave the spirit my actual name and continued to see the follow-up response. "What is your favorite food?" Honoring the spirit's rules, I opted to tell the truth instead of following up with another lie. I love Donna, and this spirit deserves to know that. The Ouija board's response. Correct. Before I could take in the affirmation from the spirit, who is asking who questions here, spirit, it followed up with yet another question. What is your biggest fear? Do not lie. The question took me aback a bit. I wasn't really afraid of anything, or so I thought. So I struggled with it. It took me a few moments. I really thought of it. I kind of cringed at the answer, but it was the truth. Something horrible happening to my little brother. No movement from the Ouija board. Seconds turned into minutes as I kept my hand awkwardly placed on the planchette. Then, finally, thank you, Spirit. and Eleonora. Welp, I obliged. I thanked the spirit for its time and decided to climb down from the treehouse where my friends were waiting. I passed on the spirit's message and told Eleonora it was her turn. Martin, Kev, and I must have spent 15 minutes standing outside the treehouse whilst Eleonora was up there. We'd pulled drinks out of our bags and were discussing my experience with the Ouija board so far. Both were incredibly surprised when I told them that the spirit was asking me questions. What kind of questions? Generic stuff like my name, favorite food, etc. Weird. Both Kev and Martin seemed a bit thrown off by it, but I was excited. I looked up at the treehouse as we heard the sounds of someone climbing down. Eleonora had finished her session. She looked traumatized. How was it? I asked her. Weird. All it did was ask me questions. Questions like? My name, my favorite hobby, my biggest fear. That one took me a while to answer. Kev turned to me. That's a little bit eerie, he said. I agreed. Didn't look like Eleonora was loving it either. But still, a spirit was asking us questions. This had to be one of the coolest, if not the coolest, paranormal experiences I'd ever experienced in my life. Eleonora turned to Martin. It said you would go up next. Martin's session seemed longer than the others. We stood outside, drinking, talking about the happenings so far, and pulling out the occasional snack. That was a little bit traumatizing, said Eleonora. Kevin pointed to her, and then up to the treehouse. Agreed, this is kinda messed up. Yeah, but that's the point, I responded. We seek out spooky happenings all the time, and we never get lucky. This is an actual, legit supernatural experience. I feel like we have to take advantage of it. Even if it's asking us personal stuff? What does it want that info for? Followed up Eleonora. I shrugged. While the biggest fear question was pretty weird, I didn't feel too worried that the spirit knew my favorite food, or what my name was. Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of someone climbing down from the treehouse. Martin had finished up his session. It felt like it had been 30 minutes, which topped the rest of our sessions. We bombarded Martin with questions as he reached the ground. He looked more shell-shocked than Eleonora did. That was pretty fucked up, he said. What did it ask you? I asked enthusiastically. My biggest fear, Martin responded. It's weird, but it felt like he didn't like my answer to that one. It almost seemed annoyed. Huh. So it was just silent after that? No. It asked me way more things than that. What the happiest moment of my life was, who I was the most jealous of, what my biggest dream was, all that stuff. It was a lot of questions, then finally it just wrapped up with a thank you, and that was that. Martin turned to Kevin. You're up next. Kevin turned to all of us. Here goes nothing, he said as he started climbing up to the treehouse. We all watched for him to make his way to the top. For the first time in the evening, I had a knot in my stomach. Only 5 minutes passed since Kevin went up, but he was already climbing down. He was shaking his head as he made his way down the ladder to our group. Fuck that, said Kevin. What happened? We asked him. He just shook his head. That shit is dangerous. We need to get the fuck out of here as soon as possible. I'd never seen Kevin like this. He was uncharacteristically shook. You're gonna have to tell us more. What did it ask you? What did it say? But Kevin ignored all of our questions. He started packing up his bag. You guys can play with fire if you want, but I'm out of here. I suggest you guys come too, he said. I watched as Martin and Eleonora started packing up as well. I had bad feelings throughout this whole thing. I think we should leave, said Martin. Guys, what the hell? Just because it's unsettling doesn't mean we have to pack up. We can just hang out up there and do something else. This doesn't feel right, said Eleonora. I watched them as they all took a few steps away from the treehouse and towards the forest. You coming? Asked Kevin. I stood my ground. Kevin shook his head and started heading out his way. Suit yourself. I had no idea what could have possibly happened up there that could have shaken him so much. He had already started walking as Martin and Eleonora pleaded with me to come with them. I said no. Begrudgingly, they all left. You're probably wondering, wasn't I scared? Especially now that I was alone. The answer was yes, but something in my soul told me that I was up next. I'd spent my whole life waiting for something that was truly supernatural to happen, and now it was in front of me. With my fingers jittering, I climbed up the treehouse as my friends departed. It took me a moment to pull together the bravery to put my hand on the planchette. The candles were still lit. The setting was just right. Finally, I spoke to the spirit again. Why are you asking us all these questions? Nothing, for a few minutes. Then my hand moved with the planchette, slower than usual. The answer, to confirm my suspicions. Confirm your suspicions of what? Movement from the planchette on the Ouija board. One of you is not who you say you are. What are you talking about? I heard blood-curdling shrieks coming from the forest outside the treehouse, like nothing I'd ever heard before. What the fuck? The planchette was moving on its own. I watched it go from letter to letter. That is not Kevin. He is coming back for you. Run. And so I did. The small section of the city I live in is generally known to be haunted. I think I know why. It's time for me to leave.